Our guest tonight is Dave K2LYV, who is a member of TARC and has also served as technical director for the for several different organizations. Very knowledgeable. And tonight, Dave's going to be talking about digital modes on HF. So, Dave, I'm going to turn it to you, and the rest of the evening is yours.
Well, thanks, Larry. Good evening, everybody. I'm going to talk about digital modes, which occupying a huge amount of activity
Jesus.
on 40 meters. If you go on 40 meters now and look at the FTH site, there are probably 40 stations every 15 seconds. So it's really gets very popular. Um, but um, but it's still a great mode. These modes are good for primarily for allowing you with a compromised antenna, limited power to work other stations, in particular work DX or work all states or even participate in contests. So I just want to let's just talk about what this is and how you get started. So FT8 is a weak signal mode. It is not a low power mode. It's a weak signal mode. You may be in some conditions where, for example, trying to talk to somebody in Europe on 20 meters at night, you need no more power because your signal will be weak. But in general, most people run with fairly low power. It's I can run somewhere between 10 and 25 watts and work reasonably efficiently given my antenna. The roots of this come from the EME, the Earth Moon Earth community, um, where those people are mostly interested in minimal signals because that's usually all you get. So you really want the other guy's call sign, some signal report, and a confirmation that he heard you and you heard him. So the exchanges here are pretty minimal, but nevertheless they are in exchange. They're not good for rag chewing. Um, there are variants of FT8. I think it's JT8 um, that are set up so they use the same protocols, but allow you to kind of type longer messages. These are more like, think of a DX expedition where basically you're sending 599 thank you. So the big thing is that Joe Taylor, who wrote the original program, who was a big EME fan, uh, to put in a lot of very sophisticated signal processing, basically complicated redundancy that allows you to transmit a bunch of bits and not only detect errors but actually correct them. And so these things enable you to work with very low signal to noise ratio. They typically quote numbers like minus 25 dB below the noise in the bandwidth. So just as I said, the typical exchange is you send CQ, your call, and your grid square. And if somebody responds, he'll send his call, your call, to give a signal report. Now, the interesting thing about the signal report is it's honest because the computer generates it based on your signal strength. And so there's no human interaction. So you never get these 20 over 9 guys who have to ask you to repeat your call 4 times. There is a 13 character freeform message you can send at the end. But a normal CQ is a CQ, your call, his call, and then you say, I got it, 73. Now, by convention, not by any rule, there are sections in each band. For most bands, it's 74 kilohertz off the bottom of the band. So like 7074, 14074. On the work bands, they're different because they don't start an even number. And that's where everybody congregates. So how do you get it? You just download it from this link. If you forget it, just ask for WSJTX and it will Google will give you the link. It's free. It's available for Windows, Mac, and Linux. If you want, you can get the source code. as I say, it's for the adventurous. There's a lot of there's I think over 100,000 lines of code and mix of Fortran, Python, and C++, and a lot of it is embedding a lot of fancy math. So, but it's simple install. You just click on the exe file, it will install itself, put an icon in your desktop, and then you have to do some configuring to get it working. So what you first need is some way to connect the audio from your computer and to your computer to your rig. Now, anything in any newer rigs, like my 7300, has a USB plug in the back that carries both rig control and um, and audio. So once I plug it in, there's two new audio devices, a USB uh, codec for mic and a USB codec for speakers. And then there's a standard push to talk and radio control. You can actually control frequencies and so on. Um, you can use a signal link or rig blaster if your rig doesn't have built-in audio. You need at least push to talk control from the computer to your radio. The rest of the stuff is nice, but not necessary. So one other thing, FT8 starts, transmissions start every 15 seconds on the starting on the minute. So it starts at 0, at 15 seconds, 30 seconds, and 45 seconds. And so you need to have your clock in the computer synchronized to UTC. And um, well, most computers, for example, especially Windows, has a client that goes out and resets your clock periodically, but it's not good enough. It won't. It maybe goes out once a day or so, and your clock will drift enough so that people won't hear you because you're out of sync. I use a program called Meinberg NTP, which is Network Time Protocol. It's a little program. You click on it, it installs itself, and it takes over keeping your clock accurate. And it will keep your clock accurate to better than a second. Okay, so now you've done that. So you begin the program. The first thing you do, you need to set up some things, and I'll just go through some of these. So the first thing is you need your call and your grid square. And there are a couple of things down here. It's nice to have a blank line. The bunch of calls will come down when you're listening. And it's nice to have a blank line to separate every 15 seconds. If you brought up metric, you can leave this off and it will then give you kilometers. And then this is a nice thing to have. It will tell you what the DXCC entity is, because some of these calls are not things you work every day. I always set this, double click on call. It makes things much easier. If you see a call that you want to talk to, you just double click it and it will automatically start the calling him and manage the whole QSO. And I always have this TX to turn it off. So that just sets the radio. Now you need to set up the radio. This is actually a screen from my older radio. This is a Yaesu which had rig control but not audio. So this one I had to set the COM port here and the baud rate and then the parameters for that. And I said push a talk via CAT, so the computer will send one of the CAT commands to trigger the rig. And then I always have the mode as data packet, which sets it up into USB packet, USB data mode. And you can click on non-rig or fake it. With my 7300, I just leave this on rig, but your choice. So now this is a tab to set up the audio. You just need to pick your line in, line out. For this rig, I had an external sound card that connected through just a transformer coupled interface to the audio in the back of the rig. the 7300, these just say audio codec. Um, then the last thing is here in reporting. Um, I always like this because after you do a QSO, it will little window will pop up showing you the log entry, and then you click OK, and WSJTX maintains its own log. And I put the DB reports, that's a signal report, in the comments. This is an important one. If you enable PSK reporter spotting, then the program will periodically report all the stations that you've heard. And if everybody else does this, which most people do, you can go to a website called PSK Reporter, and it will put up a map of the world showing where your signal is being heard and where you're hearing people. So one thing you can do is, even if you call CQ a couple of times, you can now look and see, where's my signal getting to? Am I getting out at all? Now, this is the only part that really takes a little patience. You've got to have no compression in the transceiver audio. So you don't want to crank the audio up to really push the radio to, really get the last bit of power out. What you want to do is set the rig to full power, and then you raise the audio drive. And then usually you can do this. There's a control I'll show you in a minute on the screen that actually can change the audio level. And there are also volume controls if your radio has the built-in sound card. And what you basically want to do is raise the audio drive until the ALC turns on. And then you back off just a little bit. And that's as much drive as you ever want. And if you want to, so that's your max output. And you can lower that simply by lowering the audio drive. So when you're operating, there's a control for here over on this side. There's a control that shows you the audio level for the signals coming in, and you don't want this cranked way up the rig, the input overloads. So you can kind of your audio gain on the input, turn it down to keep the signal in here. I happened to capture this while it was transmitting, so this wasn't showing anything, but you can see this is what the screen looks like. There's a window here that's showing all the various calls, showing some of these are calls in progress. Here's a CQ, and I had called this guy here, and he came back to me. So here the red is highlighting my anything with my call, and he's sending me a signal report here. And then I'm responding, and eventually he'll come back. I said the R minus 12 means I've got your report. Your report is minus 22. And then he will send back something like RR73, which means I'm done. And then you can log the contact. There is a way, if you want to call CQ, you just click this message here, TX6, and then you click the enable TX, which at the next, if you control here, decide whether you want to work on the even, that is at 0 or 30 seconds after the minute, or odd, which is 15 or 45. And then you enable TX here, and the rig will start calling CQ. At some point, if you don't get anything, there's a watchdog timer. That's what this little thing is here. And after about 6 minutes, it will simply shut off the rig. So you can call CQ and you can walk away. And if somebody answers, the program will automatically answer and carry on the QSO up to the log, and then it stops. So, but if nobody answers within 6 minutes and you forget to go back and check, at least this shuts the rig off. And over here, have a display. This is called the wide graph. Down here, you have this is a signals strength across the spectrum. This is about, you can see here, the frequency is in hertz. This goes up to 2,500. You can make this wider or narrower as you. My 7300 will go to 3,600, which is way wider. And you can see this is each of these little square things is an FT8 station. And here's two stations that are kind of overlapping. The program will be able to separate these two signals, even though they overlap. Um, Here you have three stations, one right next to another, and the program will be able to pull these out. And up here you have a waterfall. This is useful because what I usually do is I pick a frequency and then there's a hold TX frequency box. So I'll pick a frequency. So for example, I would have picked a frequency up around here because you see there's nobody transmitting here. It doesn't matter if if you don't do that, when you click on the station, your signal will go to his frequency, wherever that is. And often that's not too big a problem, but if you're talking to like a rare DX station, there are a zillion guys calling him, and if they're all piling up on his frequency, he isn't going to hear anybody. But if you're up here, remember the program is decoding all the signals in the band. See, these are all signals, and here you can see they're all the way up. You know, you see this is the frequency of each signal, and so you see the program will decode these all, so you don't have to be on his or her frequency. It's also a good idea if you can find it to pick a frequency above 1500 hertz, because that gives you that lowers the chance of any harmonics in your audio coming into the stream and distorting the signal and putting a lot of noise, which annoys everybody else. Okay, here's a little bit more detail of the waterfall. These two little goalpost thingies, the red one and the green one show you where your transmit and receive signals are. Right now here, they're both the same, but sometimes you'll have one of them, like if I had picked 2000 here, say, one of them would be over here. And then there's some controls here that you want to set this one where the lowest frequency. So this starts at 200 hertz. You don't want to go much lower than that, but it's often a good idea to go down that low. This bins per pixel sets how wide your audio spectrum is. And then this is how fast this display scrolls up. You don't need it to go running really fast. So it's nice to have things about like this. Okay, so you respond to a CQ by double clicking on the call in the left-hand window. Typically, you have about 2 seconds or so. The newer versions of the program will start decoding the stronger signals right away. And you can get some of those, you can get 3.5 seconds before. And so you have a little bit chance to catch those. But you still have 2 seconds, which once you get into the swing of it, you'll get it. But it's just a trick for a while. WSJTX maintains its own log, and it's in a directory. On the main screen, there's a files menu, and the command says open the file directory, and that's what you can see the log. You can copy it into your own, your station log. You can send it up to LOTW, and there are programs like the one I use is JT Alert X, which will talk it internally. It talks to WSJTX, and every time there's the program logs a QSO, JT Alert also picks up the information, and then we'll transfer it to your main logging program. Okay. As I said, when you're working somebody busy like a DX station, Vermont, Alaska, the relatively rare places, it's better not to call on their frequency. You can set your transmit frequency separate from your receive frequency. And I like to set my transmit frequency in a clear spot and then lock it there. And again, remember, the program is decoding every signal in the band, so you don't have to be right on the station's frequency. Okay, there are several other modes built into the program. A lot of them are for weeks, EME work. There's a mode like FT8 called FT4, which is twice as fast. Every 7.5 seconds, it sends or receives a bunch of stuff. So you have to be quick. It's great in a contest. You can just run off QSOs at about 1 a minute, but normally you don't want to. You can use it a little bit. It gets tiring fast, but Whisper is different. It's like a beacon station. It doesn't send, in no sense, doesn't send the QSO. It basically sends your grid square, um, and it sends it. There's a very narrow band of whisper frequencies on each band, where the and other stations doing whisper will also receive, and you will also hear them when they transmit. And you can even set the program to do band hopping, so it will go during the day, for example, on 20, 17, 15, and keep running around. Um, you can run it for a few hours and see where your signal is heard with a signal report. And you can go to, there's a website, whispernet.org, for reporting a map. So if you want to see how things are working, if you put up a new antenna or you've done something, you can just start Whisper up, and then you can let it sit for an hour. You don't have to monitor anything. And then you go to WhisperNet, you can see where your signals are. And if you want to do more rapid analysis, you can actually download a little database with all the reports where you were either heard or hearing someone. It's a nice little tool to kind of see how things are going, how the band is working, how your radio is working these days, whatever. Um, so this is Whisper. Um, this is a Whisper. This is PSK Reporter. Sorry. So this is PSK Reporter. I'm running here. This is showing where people are hearing me. Um, this is on 20 meters. You can see these little things are basically, one guy here in Europe is hearing me, but the rest of these are just around the US. At night, you can see here's things like down in Alaska. This is a Whisper report. This is what things are like in Alaska. So you can see I'm here in Australia, Iceland. So this is kind of I think what this demonstrates. I'm running maybe 20 to 25 watts here. I have basically an EdFed wire about 15 feet off the ground running over to a tree, and this is what I can work stations basically all across the globe. I think I've got, without too much work, I've got about 80 DXCC contacts with this. Okay, and this is what a Whisper screen looks like. You can see this is what you heard, and then it's transmitting, and it will do this until you stop the program. Okay, there are other modes. There's RTTY PSK31, which used to be very popular until, well, RTTY was popular until PSK came along, and then PSK got bumped by the WSJTX. These are still active. This weekend, if you were on 40 meters at night, there was a RTTY contest going on, I think from BARTG, British group, and the band was just covered with RTTY RTTY going on. The software I like to use for these modes is a program called FLDigi. I think of it as the Swiss Army knife of digital modes. It doesn't do the FT modes, but it does everything else. You can get it from w1hkj.com. It's free, again, and it includes the more recent versions of the program include a CW decoder, which actually does a reasonably decent job. It won't pull weak ones out of the noise, but a reasonable signal will decode pretty nicely. And it will now, the latest version, will now actually send through, if you have a WinKeyer connected, it will send things. So you can actually carry on a CW QSO with FLDigi. A lot of the logging suites, like I think Ham Radio Deluxe, I know DX Keeper has one of the members of the suite will do RTTY and PSK. None of them do WSJTX. They may have links where WSJTX will pass the logging information to the program, but you have to look at, if you've used one of these extensive suites, a lot of them do have a built-in RIDI interface. So what else? Okay, this is FL Digi. I just turned it on last night. I actually had it doing CW. And here I was picking up some guy right here doing, and you can see he's calling DL5YL. So you can see, I mean, it does work. I mean, it's not, the real CW guys here are kind of rolling their eyes, and I sympathize, but, if you're really having terrible problems learning CW and you really want to get one of those rare ones, you can try this. So that's it. That's what I got.
Dave, while we're waiting to get everyone muted, can you talk a little bit more about JT Alert and where to get it, how easy it is to set up, and exactly what it does?
It's been a while since I've used it, actually. I kind of just, I don't know. I just every once in a while would just copy the pieces of the log over into my main log. It would just was a pain for me to kind of start all these different programs and keep them running. So at some point, I just said, it's easier to me just run WSJTX, and every once in a while, just copy the log. It's fairly straightforward. I would do a Google search to find it. It works. I know with DX Keeper. I'm not sure what else. There are a bunch of these programs that will talk to WSJTX. Their WSJTX in the background is sending out UDP packets for the network aware. It's basically a little packet of information that's transmitted like it was on the internet, but it's just within your computer. And so any program kind of can hook into this kind of little pseudo network and listen for these packets, and it can decode them and say, oh, WSJTX is telling me it just made a contact, or WSJTX wants to send me a log, something. And there are actually a fairly wide variety of things that WSJTX can send under the hood. And it also can respond. Programs can talk to it as well. That's kind of in the advanced usage. It's a question of what you can find. If you're using a logging suite, see if it talks directly to WSJTX. If it doesn't, see if there are programs that will, manage the interface.
All right. Jeremy, you have a question? You're muted. Dan, can we unmute Jeremy?
Everyone's unmuted. They have to unmute themselves.
Okay. Yeah, I saw that you can press your space bar, but apparently that doesn't work. Hi, Dave.
Hi, Jeremy.
You may recall I have a 32-bit Dell computer. Do these software programs, FL Digi and WSTJ, do they work on a 32-bit?
I think not, actually.
So I need a 64-bit.
Yeah.
Okay.
At some point, they just sort of said those computers are kind of going away.
Okay. It's just that it's a, so to speak, still functional, except can't seem to do anything with it.
Somebody, I don't see Mike Westlick is running WSJTX on a Raspberry Pi 4. You can actually, there is a port of WSJTX to the Raspberry Pi, and it has enough oomph to handle the computing load.
I don't have that.
No, but it's a relatively cheap way to get there.
Well, yeah, I got this Windows 10 thing that I'm talking to you on now,
Yeah.
A relatively recent thing. So I'll just use this one, I guess. All righty, thank you, Dave. Thank you for the presentation as well.
Thank you.
Lou, you had a comment about N1MM. You're muted.
You're muted,
Okay,
Lou.
Yeah, the question was N1M can it directly interface with WSJT-X via broadcast?
Yes. The short answer is yes. There are instructions both with N1MM and WSJT-X that really walk you through what you have to do to set it up. So you can actually you can run a contest where the two of them cooperate.
It's a broadcast environment.
Yeah, it's a UDP.
WSJTX broadcasts the UDP packet, N1MM grabs the UDP packet, and away you go. One of the things that you can do with the WSJT also is the log that it creates is ADIF compatible. So what I'm doing here is whenever I spend like a week doing WSJT, whenever I do it, I just output that log and I ingest it into my normal operating program, which is called N3FJP AC log. And that takes the ADIF file and populates my log with it, so that I can keep these QSOs, record them for posterity, so to speak.
Oh, that reminds me. There's one little gotcha that you need to kind of watch for. If you go, when you install the program, after you've run for a little bit, go into that file menu and say open log directory. And when you do that, you will see there's a thing called save or SAV.
What's that?
There's a subfolder
I have no idea.
in the log directory called SAV.
Oh yeah, it was a name that means something else. It'll come to me in a
It
second.
means save. So in the WSJTX log directory, there is, let me explain this and I'll see if I can actually bring it up. There's a subfolder, there's a bunch of things, there's a log, there's configuration files, but there's this little folder called save. And when the program started, the roots of this program go back about 10 or 12 years. One of the things people wanted to do to kind of check things out was save a wave file of every 15 seconds of audio. And the problem is that if you're not aware that it's doing this, these wave files accumulate. And every 15 seconds, you're throwing another wave file in that directory. And after you've spent, a few months on here, there's a lot of space in that directory. I forgot to look for a year and I went back and looked and there was like 5 gigabytes or something of wave files. There is now a way to stop it from doing that. But basically, if you've been running this program, go check your directory and make sure there's nothing in that. You can just erase the files. It won't affect anything, but stay aware that it needs to be checked. Lee,
Lee, you have a question?
you're muted.
I think Lee and John TYK.
Okay. Lee, you're muted. Okay, let's go to John.
Dave, the tool tab on WSJTX, I've never really had to mess with it, but what does that do? And does that have any bearing on FT8 and FT4?
That's a good question. Let me see if I can. I'm going to start up on my other computer. No, hang on. I have more computer than desks. Oh, okay. Got it. Yeah, what these are, what these modes are you can do some frequency. You can adjust the audio response. You can put in compensation to make it flat across the bandwidth. And so that if you open the window, there are two things that say erase reference spectrum and measure reference spectrum. And you can basically erase what it is. And there's instructions in the very nice manual that comes with the program that tells you how to measure this reference spectrum. Basically, you go off on some place where there's nothing but band noise and let it run for a couple of minutes. And then the program will measure the spectrum and it will store it, and it will use that to compensate if your audio isn't flat. Another thing, there are some other things about measuring phase response, which I've never even tried. There is a frequency calibration mode in which the program will go out and measure the frequency of, you can set up the stations. I have one AM station and WWV at 2.5, 5, 10, and 15 megahertz, and a couple of the Canadian stations, time stations. And the program measures each frequency. And then because it knows WWV is on 10 megahertz, period, 10,000. So if you measured it at 10,003, then you know your rig calibration is off by 3 hertz, which never hurt anybody, but you can fit these things to kind of get a compensation curve, and then it will adjust your frequencies so that they're right on. It's just a little extra little piece of thing. You can actually use the program in this mode. I've actually done one of those frequency measuring tests where, they set a frequency at some, they'll announce a frequency somewhere near 7285 or something. And then at a certain time, they'll call QST for a couple of minutes, and then they'll turn the signal on for 1 minute. You have to measure the frequency. And nowadays, to get into the kind of gold star category, you have to be less than 1 hertz off. There are guys who take this very seriously and have GPS disciplined rubidium maser kind of things. And these are guys that worry about the last 10 millihertz. But I have just with this measured better than 1 hertz routinely. So, it's another little fun thing you can do if you have, we have to look for stuff to do until we can get out in the world again. Does that answer your question?
Yes. Thank you, Dave. And
Yeah.
thanks for the presentation.
Yeah.
Lee, are you there?
Yeah, I am. One thing, the Raspberry Pi 4 is a 64-bit system, so it will run. You can run WSJTX on it. You do have some work ahead of you. I recommend that you first get used to Raspbian on the Pi, and then there is a downloadable for Ubuntu, which would be your OS. So you'd actually be running it on a Linux-based system, and then you can compile it. Like I said, you're going to have some work with the libraries and some work with the USB card, the sound card side. The other thing about WSJTX is it works great as a remote system using either AnyDesk or TeamViewer. I recommend AnyDesk. You can run WSJTX on a remote system at your house and can use an iPad. It's perfect for that. The processing is done on the remote system, so you don't need to set up digital audio cables or anything like that. Set everything up to run on the remote, and then basically you're using your iPad or your remote computer as a terminal only. That's it for me.
Yeah. Thanks for adding that. Another thing you can do that some of us already been doing, as you know, we have the the Flex 6400 at the clubhouse that you can run remotely from home or wherever. And I've set it up. WSJTX has next to the file menu, there's a little entry menu called configurations. And basically you can set up a configuration to run with one radio, set a different configuration for your second radio and so on. And so what I've done is I've set up a configuration for the remote 6400, and then I've gone in and adjusted the radio setup to get the right communication channel. I've set up the right the DAX channel, that's the Flex audio, to do it. And it works just great. And let me tell you, you get on that 40 meters at night and you point that big 40-meter beam wherever you want, and people just say hi, no problem. It's just amazing. It's kind of fun if you've never had the experience of working, a big gun station someplace, to kind of get that feel, what it's like to just call and some people come back to you. So another reason to kind of pay your dues, join up, and get yourself trained to use the Flex. Aside from the fact that it's a great rig anyway, even for just anything else you want to do.
Okay. Any other questions? And by the way, if you want more information on the Flex, contact Lou, W4LT. He is our person in charge of that and coordinates all the Flex activities. And so contact Lou and he can get you set up. Any other questions for Dave tonight?
But Dave, if you're an appliance operator like myself, what would you say is the easiest or most user-friendly mode to get going with?
Probably FT8. I think, we can, set up a one-to-one Zoom and get you all set up, once you get connected to your rig and computer. And, once you get all the parameters set, it just works. You don't need to do anything except, click on people to call.
All right, cool. Thanks.
Dave, thanks so much for being with us tonight and sharing with us. We really appreciate it. And just a reminder that next month, we are going to be gearing our TARCTalks to new hams. More information will be coming on that in a little bit, but if you know of someone who's fairly new, just taking a test or even just got his general, this class will be really well suited for him. So be watching for more information coming on that. And as Dan's already said, now's a great time to renew your membership to TARC. Thank you, everyone, for joining us.
Hey, Larry.
Yeah, Dave, go ahead.
This thought occurred to me. I believe techs have privileges on the bottom of 10 meters and they can do digital. And
Yes, they can. Yes, they can.
yeah, and I know 10 meters is kind of like a graveyard of QSOs right now, but hopefully it will not be too long before 10 will be open during the day. And even a tech can get on 10 meters and make some digital contact. So it's something to keep in mind. You could do it, and every once in a while, if you go on 10 meters, you will hear people. Not a lot, but there are people during the day, many days. But in 2 or 3 years, when we start to climb the solar cycle, it will be more widely available, a bit with better chance of talking to somebody. By the way, there is at least one paper I've read by a couple of guys who think they have decoded, based on the magnetic cycles of the sun, how to predict the amplitude of the next one. And they're saying this one could be as big as the largest one we've seen yet. So we can keep our fingers crossed that they're right. And the other guy's saying it's just going to be like the last cycle. Let's hope they're wrong. So,
All right.
all right.
Keep your fingers crossed. Okay.
Well,
There's no
okay,
other
thank
questions. Okay. Thank you, Dave. No other questions. Then good night, everyone. Be safe out there, and we'll talk to you soon.